Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm here in Montreal, Canada. I hope everybody's doing well over there. So yeah, let's get started. I'm going to take you through an epic journey through the audio universe that is Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. So let's dive right in. So introduction first. I'm Steve Szczepkowski. And if you're wondering, the last name is pronounced Szczepkowski, and there won't be a test. You can not worry about it. So moving forward, I've been an audio director in the video game industry for the last 20 years. And I've been the senior audio director with Eidos Montreal for the last 15 years. And basically, some of the titles that I've shipped would be Human Revolution, Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, the live breach mode that we had, and all the DLCs as well as promotional material. So another interesting thing to note is I've been a performing rock musician for the last 30 years. And if you need some proof of that, well, here I am in all my Spraynet 80s glory. Here I am in the 90s trying to look as angst and grunge worthy as possible. And here I am today. So this will conclude the comedy portion of the presentation, in case you were wondering. And the last thing I'm going to mention is, as a kid, I grew up on a healthy diet of comic books, Marvel books, Stephen King books, big reader, loved horror and science fiction, and a healthy dose of rock and roll. So all of these passions prepared me for my role as the senior audio director on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. So we got some destinations today on our journey. Pre-production, we're going to take an overlook at the steps we took to scope the game and define our vision and to get the right pieces in place. We're going to look at production and how we managed to get everything we wanted in and a few extras. And finally, the closing and the mix, a look at the climactic finale to our journey. So our journey begins a few years ago. So in pre-production, we asked a lot of questions. So starting with what we needed to have once this phase would be finished. So things we needed to have and be ready for as we stepped into production. So of course, we were going to need a composer. We were going to need a music licensing partner because I knew I wanted to have licensed music in this game. We were going to need a solid sound design plan because this was going to be bigger and different than anything I had ever done. And X factors, which I'll get to in a little bit. So questions for the composer. What do we want as a score? Well, I knew we wanted a big, epic, orchestrated score. It had to feel Marvel. I wanted the feeling of a Saturday matinee when you and your friends were sitting there waiting for something like Star Wars to begin, and when the lights went down and you all start throwing popcorn at the screen and yelling, that feeling of excitement, almost like a roller coaster about to take off. Musically, this would be a huge undertaking. There was going to be massive deliverables. Recording a full orchestra, it was something I had never done, so I was going to need to rely on the composer quite a bit. Which brings me to my next point. There was going to need to be a lot of trust between us. And ultimately, creatively, someone I could mesh with. So I needed to answer all these questions. And thankfully, one man checked off all those boxes. And that magical man was Mr. Richard Jakes. For those of you who don't know, this is some of Richard's credentials. And if there are any James Bond fans out there who haven't played or listened to the score from Bloodstone, I highly recommend it. It was very impressive. And it showed me what Richard could do, and it gave me a lot of confidence moving forward. So the budget for this game was originally for 4 hours of music recording. The game grew, and at one point I told production, look, we need to add at least another hour of music and recording time, or it's not going to be enough. Thankfully, I had a great production team that trusted me and listened to me, and we did make the decision to go ahead, and it was the right one. We completed the game with just over 5 hours of scored music, all recorded at Abbey Road Studios, which I'll get to in a bit. And just so you know, there was close to 6 hours of cinematics in the game. We would need to be creative on how to cover all this. And of course, when I say 6 hours, it's not a true number because we have a lot of branching dialogues, but it's still way over the original estimate. So it was fine, but we would need to keep that in mind as we went forward. So one thing I really wanted to focus on with the music was musical pillars, and one of them was themes. And when I asked for the pitch to the composers, I made a very strong push saying I wanted to hear themes. If you were going to give me something like a main theme, well, I wanted to hear variations of it because I wanted that to be present in the game. Unknowingly, this would help me quite a bit as it allowed me to reuse music over the course of the game, which is a term known as leitmotif. Some of the themes we focused on were loss and grief, which was a huge theme in our game. Nova Corps, which we gave like their own military theme. Lady Hellbender, who had a huge chapter devoted to herself, plus we visited her planet, so she definitely warranted her own theme. The Universal Church of Truth and Raker, who was our antagonist. The Magus, which we came up with a very cool sound design effect that we always used when it was involving the Magus or the Promise. And the most importantly, the hero theme, which was our main Guardians theme, which you'll hear in a little bit with our composer. So now jumping to one of the next pillars we were talking about in pre-prod was the licensed music. So this game's music would be 80s based. That was something we had decided. So the questions came again. What songs would we need or want? What styles do we want? So I did a big exploration. Thankfully, I had a huge knowledge of the 80s music already. And the conclusion we came to was sort of rock, pop, and new wave worked the best. We tried almost everything, but that seemed to be the right recipe. Now, how many songs can we afford to have in the game? How will we use them all? How can we maximize our return on this, meaning the money that we were shelling out for all this? You definitely want to make sure you're hearing the song and using it as much as you can and not just using it for like 10 seconds. Most importantly, who's going to take care of the legal side of obtaining these songs and clearing all the uses? I mean, I had a good knowledge in publishing and being a musician for the last 30 years, but this was beyond anything I had ever done. So thankfully, I hooked up with this gentleman here, Randy Eckhart from Eckhart Consulting. Randy worked on a lot of the early EA games and the Guitar Hero franchise games. He came highly recommended through a trusted friend and peer in the industry. And he had contacts both with legal and with the labels, which I knew was a bonus right off the bat. Plus, he had advice on how we should proceed forward using terms that would work for all the marquee artists as well as us. So we started with a list of about 50 songs that we explored and just kept shaving the list down and adding to it. I still didn't know all the ways I would use licensed music, just that the IP needed it. So I continued exploring and just messing around with music. And as I played with the licensed music and I was looking for ways to make the most of the songs and the money we were spending, it hit me all the more that I really needed to find a good way to use all this. We were investing quite a bit of money into the licensed music side, and I wanted to make sure we got back a great return on it. So I'm going to circle back to this topic. It's going to be a theme that I hit a few times. So now looking at the sound design, we looked at identifying some of the most important sounds we were going to hear in the game over and over again. Star-Lord's Elemental Blaster was at the top of the list. It's where we put the most efforts. The rate of fire, the volume sitting in the mix, the stereo feel we wanted of the guns. The Milano and the hyperspeed transition was another very important one that we knew we'd hear a lot in the game. Star-Lord's visor effect, which we definitely wanted a difference in the environment. We played with cutting ambiances out, adding reverbs, and I think we found a cool recipe for when the visor went on and it wasn't too annoying. Combat special attacks, there was a lot of special attacks from the Guardians. We were going to have to treat all of these as well. And finally, all the aliens and creatures in our game. So looking at that last subject, this was a huge subject for me. I knew one of the maps we were visiting in the game was nowhere, and I wanted that credible Star Wars feeling to anywhere we had aliens in the game. I just felt Star Wars was the bar we were aiming for. I did a focus group test with some local actors who I knew could do like some really interesting, weird voices, but it wasn't right, and I knew it. It still felt a bit too cartoony and Saturday morning animation driven, and it wasn't really right. So how was I going to create what I had in my head? Well, thankfully, the universe delivered to me the Monster Factory, or La Fabrique des Monstres. And what this is a local troupe made of death metal singers that actually has singers. They're based here, but they have singers all over the world. And these are people that can do very aggressive things with their voices that normal actors probably wouldn't want to do. So it was a very interesting concept to me. So I met with their head monster, which was Sébastien Creteau. He's the head of the company, and we would meet weekly and discuss ideas and see if there was a good creative fit. So I told him I wanted nowhere in the game to feel authentic and rich, using the Star Wars cantina as seen as the reference. And we would spend a lot of time talking and pitching ideas. We decided we would need alien languages to be created, as well as creature source sounds. So it wasn't just getting actors who could get in front of the mic and do something really cool. It was going to actually need, because we had races of aliens, we needed to be more consistent and actually have languages created. So this was going to be a huge, huge amount of work. However, we spent 6 months to a year just crafting our design through film references and test recordings, and created a giant reference Bible. To support narrative, we had to make some languages English, but we still tried to make them sound alien. I didn't want to cheapen out and just give them like some British or exotic accent and be like, well, there you go. We said, no, let's try and keep it alien. And I'll show you some examples as we go forward. And we would have to lock into design for every creature during production and start thinking about getting it all recorded. Casting the actors to support the design. So how this happened was during all those weekly meetings and reference Bible talks, Sebastien would send me demos that he would do himself. Like, for this creature, how about this? And the ones that I liked, we would lock it in saying, okay, that's the design. And then he would look in his troupe of singers and performers for people who could do that voice that was needed. And by doing so, we eventually found all our actors that would fill out our cast. So this is just to show you a bit of the tracking that I did. These are some of the aliens that appear. This is a creature. These are some of the races. And you'll see all these little write-ups, basically I created on my own to help Seb, because when creating the languages, I mean, the guy's really intelligent and he wanted to know, well, is this a warring race? Because if it is, it's going to be very strict on hard consonants and like these big sort of things. And if they were a peaceful race, it would have a completely different language approach. So that was great for him. And for me, I needed to track, like, where they're going to need facial recording. If it was facial, well, the union here says you have to do X amount of hours. So then I have to fill that recording time with enough content for them to record. So this was all a lot of tracking for me, but it showed you, I had line counts, whether they needed face cam, just voice cam. It was very complex. So let's jump to the X factors, okay? And I'm going to tell you what my X factors were. So the definition, a variable in any given situation that could have the most significant impact on the outcome. What I'm meaning about X factors is I was looking for audio X factors. I knew this game lent itself well to audio, and I wanted to take full advantage of that. So looking for X factors, we found a few. One being the Star-Lord album, one being the jukebox inside the Milano, the huddle, a feature in our game, and the the main menu in our game. So now let's take a look at these. So starting with the Star-Lord band, this is the album cover of the album we've made. The concept was that Peter Quill took the name of Star-Lord because he grew up worshiping a band from the 80s called Star-Lord. I thought it was a brilliant concept, and it was another way that we were able to sort of make this Guardians our own version as compared to the MCU. So could we write and record the actual album and make it available in the game? I mean, I definitely wanted to, but I had no idea if I'd be able to pull this off. So how would I pull this off? See, I'm getting ahead of the slides now. How would I pull this off? Well, that's a great question. I thought a lot about it, and I would need to partner with somebody. So I partnered with Yoann Boudreau, who's the head of his own company, Alchemic Audio. Yoann Boudreau is a friend of mine. He's also an amazing musician, but he's also the mixer for all of our trailers and any of our promotional stuff for Guardians, as well as past projects. And he's been a recording engineer that we use for all our mocap recordings and all our VO recordings. So we have a great history together. So we wrote and recorded Space Riders, a song off the album, as our first demo, because we needed to do a proof of concept. Could we do this? And for those of you who don't know the story, basically I presented the song to our creative director without telling him it was me singing it. My intent was always to find another singer who would come in and do the singing. But our creative director heard it and he was like, "Who's singing?" And I said, "It was me." And he was like, "Really? It's you?" And he's like, "Okay, you're going to be the singer." So inside, I was super excited. As a guy who's been playing in bands all my life, I couldn't believe I was going to have this opportunity. So our next step was for me to sit down with JF and go, well, what are we going to write about? Because obviously I can't make this like, a Motley Crue record about, strippers and stuff and weird things that don't fit into this universe. And he was like, no, we're going to focus on, believing in yourself, family, overcoming the odds, grief. These were the themes of our game. So we wrote all the songs around that. The album was written and recorded in about 2.5 years. So now jumping to the huddle. Design had a great concept for like a Hail Mary type speech when things were going bad that would give the team a boost when you needed it. So it was a great concept, a great idea, and looking for ways to get more use out of our licensed songs, that point that I said I wanted to keep coming back to. I tried putting the songs underneath some footage one day that I'd captured of combat, and I just brought it into the DAW and I killed the score that was under it, and I just brought in some licensed track, and I was like, huh, that's pretty cool having this after the payoff, like having after the speech. But here's what we had. I want you to see it in its original form without the payoff at the end, and this will focus more on the speech part, the first part.
Guys, huddle up! I cannot fight beside you any longer, rodent. Your battle skills are sloppy and erratic.
My skills? You've got all the subtlety of a brain-dead battering ram!
Say the word, Peter Quill, and I shall single-handedly tear these fiends apart!
Whoa, 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 guys! These insults you keep tossing around, are we a team, or should we just throw each other's lives away? Because the only thing that matters here is that we knock them out together. Who's with me?
Feel my wrath!
Let's do this!
There you go. So pretty cool. But we love the vibe, but honestly, we felt we were losing the pacing a bit coming out of combat. It sometimes felt a bit jarring, and I'll show you what I mean in a little image that I did. So basically, you would come out of combat, and as you saw there, it would drop down, and there's kind of a drone going on in the background, and you get your speech. He'd click the Walkman, and the part you haven't seen yet, which we jump back into combat with the licensed track. But it was in this speech part that we felt we were losing people a bit, like the energy, you come out of combat and then you're into a speech and back into combat. It could feel a bit jarring at times. So what I proposed, I had this in my head forever. And finally, at some point in production, I sat down with Richard and I said, what do you think? Like, can we make this better? Can we score something? I don't know, maybe anthem, stadium-like, something, a sports, I was trying to just get a big crowd energy reference, And what I showed him was I said, instead of dropping down, what if we came down, instead of 100%, maybe 65, 70%, and then ramped back up into combat. So it felt like during that whole speech you saw, instead of it being so static, there would be something dynamic building here. And Richard loved it. And he delivered a track to me that I fell in love with. And here's the final result. I want you to hear it for yourself. And it includes the music payoff at the end. So this was our huddle feature, one of our X Factors.
Looks like...
Guys, huddle up! Yes! Celebrate this moment, my friends! Victory shall soon be ours! They shall carve our name in the history books, Peter Quill, and it will not be spelled incorrectly!
Look, I know we want to celebrate because we're maybe 2 steps away from winning this fight. But if we start dancing before we actually win, these scut holes will send us to our graves. So let's keep our focus and show these losers exactly how we rock. Who's with me?
Victory is ours!
Nice one, Peter!
Time to...
This city! We don't want to be here for reinforcements!
Don't let up! Slow him down! Make your
Freeze
peace!
guys down! Hit him where this is how it's done!
So there you go. That's the huddle, how it finished and how it shipped. And I was really happy that we were able, in my opinion, to make it better and more dynamic during that speech part. So now looking at a few of the other X factors that I mentioned, the Milano jukebox. So it seems simple enough, but God, what a valuable tool to have in our box. What an asset to have, because we felt in trying to establish the Milano as the Guardian's home. In the game, you're constantly going on missions, and then a lot of times you end up back in the Milano to head somewhere else, go and hit a new planet, come back to the Milano, etc. So in trying to establish the Milano as the Guardian's home, music could help a lot. Like for me, as a musician, obviously here in my house, there's always music playing in one room or the other. There's music always going in the house. So a great way to sort of sell the concept that the Milano is their home is to have music available all the time. The other great thing was it gave us the ability to use music to help set the mood to the Guardian's current vibe and have it stage important conversations, as we couldn't score everything. It was just too big of a game. So this became a great tool. And again, hitting that point that I made about maximizing the payback that we were paying out for all this music, I wanted to use it as much as possible. So this gave us a great tool that, you know, we could, if they came from a planet and they were in a tense sort of argument amongst themselves, well, we would put on a song that would reflect that vibe, and it worked really well. The other thing that it also did is using the use of licensed music, it helps us to make our characters feel much more human, because despite their alien origins, it helps establish a common ground between the game's cast and its players. So, you know, having Drax or Gamora or Rocket, you know, or even Groot comment and reference, you know, one of the licensed tracks that it was either playing in the Milano or something, it made it easier for the player to bond with these characters who did have a very alien background. So again, you know, it was a great win on many fronts. So let's have a quick look at the jukebox.
So, Drax, excited to meet our buyer after we catch the monster?
Of course. Lady Hellbender is a legendary warrior and a noble queen.
And she's rich.
That is not a prowess, simply a commercial fact.
As long as she buys her monster, she doesn't need to be royalty.
You are jealous of her status.
So there you go. What was great was it was interactive, so the player could pick and choose songs as they walked around the Milano, which was great. It was a really good X factor that we found. So staying on that topic, the main menu. Someone at one point early on in production showed me this static image, and there was something about it I just fell in love with. I loved the fact that Peter was sitting there with his Walkman, and it triggered an idea. So I was like, instead of normal menu music, because I didn't even know what I would use as a menu music, because we were going very classic score, and it didn't seem like it would fit in the opening. I was like, what if we somehow use this to showcase our licensed music? So I took this image, I brought it into my DAW, I stretched it out to about a minute, and then I just started grabbing snippets of our licensed tracks and putting fast forward and rewind sounds in between them. Basically just trying to emulate Star-Lord sitting there and scrolling through his Walkman as if he was looking for a certain song. So at one point, Creative saw it and they just fell in love with it, and they came back and they said, listen, we're going to run with it. We're going to animate it all, and it's going to look great. So, you know, put it on your list as songs to clear and make sure we're good for the usage. So here it is as it shipped like this.
Don't you wanna be free?
So very simple concept, but very effective, and it fit with the brand and the IP. And again, I was happy to find another angle to push the music out front. So now we finished our first destination. We're going into our second one, production. It's happening. It's real, and everything's now happening, and it's time to rock and roll. So to give you an update on all those pillars we just looked at, the licensed music, things were moving at light speed. We began to narrow down our song list and lock down the songs contractually via Randy Eckhart and our legal department. I began using the Huddle as my testing ground for any licensed songs we were going to bring in or you know, lock down contractually. So they had to work in the huddle, otherwise I wasn't interested in using them. And I started looking at using the licensed music in cinematics as well, mainly transitional ones to help balance the scoring budget, because I was always keeping a very sharp eye, an accountant's eye on the minutes we were using, and I'll show you that in a few slides. So every idea we had, whether it was the jukebox, the main menu, the huddle, they all had to be legally cleared. So every time I had one of these new ideas, it just meant that I was at making the game better, but making my headaches bigger, because I'd have to go back to Randy and go, okay, I want to use all the music like this. Go and make sure it's all cleared. And this is hence why Randy and I were working together for quite a while, because it took quite a while to get everything cleared, but we managed to get clearance for everything, which was great. And the process, I can't tell you, was a huge learning experience for me. I mean, I had a music background, so I knew what publishing was and mechanicals and performance rights, but this took it to a whole new level. And I just tried to be a sponge and learn as much as I could from Randy and all the experts I was surrounding myself with. So again, licensed music, we began to spread the licensed music throughout the game. And Richard, the composer, and I had to really focus on all the musical transitions, because often we were going to go from a licensed track to the score or the other way around. And we had to keep it seamless. It had to be, you know, you couldn't have anything jarring. We had to respect the keys of the music and make sure everything transitioned seamlessly. So we use this a lot in the game, transitions such as at the end of chapter 1, you go from I Ran by Flock of Seagulls into the score. And chapter 3 is one of my favorites, the Everyone's a Winner into the score, because this was the first one we kind of nailed. And it was tough because it's a big, long scene with the music playing. There's timed and untimed choice wheels. So you can't just put a linear track there. It would never work. So we found tricks, we found recipes, and it took like almost bending time to do this, because I was really adamant. I wanted the ending of the scene when he goes, let's go sell a monster, to bam, 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 bam. So we go from positional audio inside the Milano to full stereo outside. It worked great, but it needed that ending. Through many trial and error, we did manage to make it work. And I'm going to show it to you right now so you can listen to it.
Group, buddy, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I want you to know we're gonna bust you out of there right after, okay?
I am Groot.
All right, let's do this. Let's go sell a monster.
We're not seriously flying into that.
Say the weather patterns of Seknarf 9 are tied to the temperament of its ruler.
That's not how women work.
Or weather. Anyways, I'm sure it looks worse than it is.
There! That's Lady Hellbender's fortress.
Get us in close, Quill. I don't want to walk in this.
So there you go. Smooth, seamless. So now touching back on sound, at our peak, we were 9 on the audio team. It's not a huge team, including myself, my technical director, and our audio programmer. So basically 6 content creators. We had 16 chapters, and each sound designer had map ownership. They were responsible for the map and the sounds in it, as well as the music integration. And I now had to focus on completing the creature and alien designs, which was starting to drag, and I had to address it. So it was now time to record all our cast for the aliens and creatures. We needed to gather all the animations and everything so that they could act to their creature NPC. We recorded it all in our mocap studio so that they could actually have freedom to move and get into character. So let's have a listen to Some of Nowhere. Listen for all the alien voices you're going to hear.
Enjoy the wonders of the Emporium.
Oh, no. That's too bad, Captain. Looks like you lose.
It was positive that's where the ball was.
The eyes play tricks. Sometimes the mind can't keep up.
Something tells me it's not my eyes playing tricks.
A nasty Bob, Captain. Thanks for the lettuce. Have yourself a fine day.
Hey there.
Look at you, barely skin and bones. Moping your way through the market. Better have a hot bite. It'll make you feel better. So, you hungry or what?
No, thanks. Was hoping for a friendly ear, though.
Never was one for small talk. Especially if you ain't a paying customer.
So that was a bit of our showcase of Nowhere. And again, staying on aliens and creatures, this bad boy was the Wendigo, one of our big creatures. What's cool about them is they're just very vicious and aggressive, but they do yell Wendigo for whatever reason, but we thought it was really cool. So let's have a look at how a great monster death metal singer's source recording can turn into the creature. Let's listen.
It's your new best bud.
I'd say.
So yeah, that was great. Having all that source material was awesome. Here's another thing I was really proud of, and I thought it was interesting. We had the World Mine, which appears in our game. It's a great concept. For those of you who don't know, it's basically all the best and wisest of Xandar that becomes part of a collective consciousness. So what was cool about that is I said, okay, well, if it's a collective conscious, can we use male and female voices and kind of run them together in sync? Now, of course, this created a few problems for recording it, but we managed to just spend a bit of extra time in prep work. And I was really happy with how it came out. It sounded really cool. So let's have a listen.
A mass delusion known as the Promise
is sweeping its systems, converting all who encounter it.
In less than 3 cycles,
it has spread from the crew of a single star
frigate to multiple outposts,
worlds, and systems.
So there you have it. I just really like the concept of having male and female voice constantly interleaving into each other, and you get one or the other. I thought it was interesting. So looking again in production, the casting, I casted all the secondary characters in the game myself, including designing all of the enemy NPC factions. So what that meant was I had to track every secondary character and allocate roles and lines to actors to maximize recording times, as well as create the combatant pools. How many different voices or actors are needed for these pools? Same for all the creature pools. So here's some of my sheets. Like you can see, I was tracking how many dialogue lines they had, how many barks they would have, and that would give me the answer of how much time we needed. Plus, it allowed me to see who I was reusing, because again, you know, when you have to record someone for 2 hours, to me, it's a complete waste of bad management in that you have the actor come in for 15 minutes and you're now paying them for 2 hours. So of course, you don't want to sacrifice quality, but I made sure that we tried to maximize. If we had them for 2 hours, they were recording for at least 90 minutes. So giving you an update now on the music side in production, I was now syncing with Richard daily, and we would provide him, I'd provide him with a full video chapter walkthrough for every chapter in the game. I'd also include a Word doc that would use timestamps to reference events in the video where I would need music, like an establishing shot, a stinger, cutscenes, combat, etc., along with my notes for all of this. And also included would be an Excel doc with additional info, the song naming, estimated time lengths, and I would give him all the cinematics as separate files so he could work on them separately. So here's a bit of an idea of like a chapter 8 where we had we have a whole sort of branching dialogue bit with Raker. So again, we have, you know, limited, like there's no time limit choice wheels and stuff. So I created flow charts to kind of show him what I was thinking, and then we would discuss it. And, you know, sometimes he would have a better alternative to suggest, and we would go with that. But ultimately, it's my job to sort of make it as easy for him to jump in and start scoring. And you could see, like, I would put timestamps with, you know, if there was notes needed, I would give him the notes. And I would have an Excel sheet that would have the same timestamps as the Word doc. If we had old naming that was like laying around and it was legacy because the game expanded and, you know, we get new script names, we would have the new names here. We would track it here, what type of use it was, the time. And just to show you, chapter 8, one of the biggest chapters, had 90 music entries. Now, again, a lot of this is combat into combat, but every piece of music had to be tracked. And this number here is always what scared me. I knew we had 16 chapters, so roughly about 18 minutes per chapter. So anytime I saw this, it kept me up at night because I knew I had to pay back that debt somewhere down the game. So part of the fun and stress. So again, sticking with music, we also needed a 10-minute June E3 gameplay demo to be planned out and recorded back in early 2021. So for that, we knew we weren't planning on recording the final score until the end of June. So what we did is we recorded a small ensemble. We took all the music that was going to be in the demo, and we did a hybrid of MIDI and live instruments, with the live instruments mixed more out front, so it felt more dynamic. We needed to have all the game music composed by mid-June, as the recordings at Abbey Road were booked for the last 2 weeks of June. And July would be Richard mixing the recordings with Jake Jackson into 7.1 and quad mixes. The deadline for all these deliveries was August 1st. So just the last thing to show you how busy we were, it was crazy, but we even found time. Every now and then you just have to sort of make room for something. At the request of one of the writers, she asked if we could write this Catathian war song for Drax and the Guardians to sing. She just gave us Catathian lyrics and we ran with it. And I said to Richard, I don't know, something stoic. And I gave him like the old Soviet Union anthem as my reference. And here's what we came up with.
Pelmafin sardut, Jutkai nageltau, Gothen kogalmak.
Pelmafin sardut, Jutkai nageltau, Gothen kogalmak.
Pretty funny. So there you go. So I'm now going to welcome Richard Jakes to share some of his insights and let him take you through some of the stuff that he was doing. Richard?
Thanks a lot, Steve, and hello everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the score for the game. So as previously mentioned, we wanted to utilise leitmotif throughout the score to represent the various characters and narrative settings of the game. And the first theme I wrote was for the Guardians themselves, which we simply called the hero theme. This theme creates a sense of exploration throughout the galaxy, but also a sense of heroism and not taking itself too seriously, as you would expect from these bunch of misfits. So let's have a listen to the main theme now, which is in MIDI format, created in my studio using virtual instruments. As well as all the themes in the game, I wanted to use underscore especially for when the player is traversing or exploring new areas. So here's an example of that in the forest of Seknarf 9, where we also use scripted events.
Looks like something big moved through here.
Yay!
If you see anything with claws the size of Drax, let me know.
I thought we already had our monster. What's she tracking this thing for? Just further proof that we are not alone.
Nowhere is a particular section of the game that the player will visit, and in this level there are loads of bars and clubs and various alien life forms, so we wanted to bring that to life through music.
So, you want us to bring them back here?
Not necessary.
Enjoy the wonders of the Emporium. Commemorate your visit with a unique souvenir. Welcome.
During the puzzle sections of the game, the player will use Star-Lord's visor to help solve the puzzle and look around the environments. Musically, I wanted to do something different here, so when you're not using the visor, the music is more organic and orchestral, but when you're in the visor, it's more electronic, and we blend between stems seamlessly here.
We're
Perhaps the Nova Killer knows how to redirect these machines. She has experience.
I was an assassin, not a saboteur.
Same results either way, right?
Looks like the wall's weak here. Drax, I need a hole here to reach the grid.
And you will have one.
Player choice is a big part of the game, and there are some sections that are a lot more emotional than others, especially with branching dialogue trees. The way I scored this was to use a lot of flowcharts and diagrams to aid me in creating the appropriate music for all the branches. Here's a short example of some of this music in context.
So, this is the thing you had to do? Come to the observation deck to look at the rift?
No. I came to honor the memory of my family. They died without meaning or honor.
I think I know what you mean, man. My mom when the Shatara came. She also died for no reason. They just shot her.
Working in the pandemic was never going to be easy, but social distancing presented its own set of challenges, especially with regards to recording. We were not able to have the maximum amount of players in any one room at any one time because we had to have a minimum of 2 metre distance between them. Here's an example with the choir where we would normally have around 35 or 40 singers in the room, but we were only allowed 16 in this particular studio. What we had to do was layer them up and multi-track them. So if you have a look at this mic chart from Abbey Road, you can see the social distancing has been taken into account. And now let's have a listen to the second pass of the choir, hearing the first pass as well, giving the effect of 32 voices. And now let's have a listen to the finished cue in-game.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Once we finished the recordings, we knew the mix would be both complex and large due to the number of tracks we'd had to record due to social distancing. So we recorded a mix in Pro Tools using 3 HDX cards and around 700 tracks. This is because we were mixing in 7.1, so in each Pro Tools session we had 8 7.1 stems, so for example strings, brass, wind, choir, and a 7.1 master track, and we also had 8 stereos, brass, wind, choir, etc., plus a stereo master, using a lot of bussing and VCAs. So in any one pass we could bounce out every single asset for the game that we needed and for the soundtrack at the same time. You can hear the main theme here and have a look through the Pro Tools session. As well as composing the score, I'm also responsible for recording, budgeting, scheduling, and I needed a team of people behind me to assist with these tasks. So I had a team of 11 copyists who were working in Sibelius, preparing the music to take to the studio, and I also had an assistant on the project who was invaluable. So my advice is always to get a good team of people around you and learn to delegate tasks. Thanks for watching, and I'll hand you back to Steve.
Thank you, Richard. So closing out production now, giving you a few last bits of information. The Star-Lord Band, the album was completed. The last track was written and recorded was Zero to Hero in January 2021. And Zero actually replaced Space Riders as the opening song. So up until that point, it was always Space Riders. The sad thing is that we now replaced the song, so we had to change the key of the opening. So it meant Richard had to go back and transpose that, but you know, it's rock and roll. We also have managed to, through Randy, connect with Rolling Stone and get them to lend us the fonts and everything to include a Rolling Stone magazine. And what was really cool is we actually did a mock interview with one of their writers that you can read. and he did a mock review of the album that we provided him. So it just shows you, like, we really went deep in trying to create the lore behind the Star-Lord band and just enrich the experience for the player. So now it's the finale, our final destination, and we're basically going to look at the mix. We knew we needed to surround ourselves with experts for the mix. It was a very challenging game to mix. There's 5 main characters who speak and need to be heard at all times. There's multiple weapon sound effects from the Guardians as well as from their enemies. There's an epic score we want to hear. In-game sound effects like Foley, explosions, etc., as well as important gameplay UI sound effects. So that's a lot of stuff that you got to be able to hear all of it clearly. We met with a bunch of post-production facilities, but in the end, we decided on Molyneux Studios in Soho, UK, and it couldn't have been a better choice. One of my requests was for them to provide us someone with mix experience to help us, because we get to mix a game every 4 or 5 years, and this was going to be huge. So we were fortunate enough that they paired us with Mr. Richard Pryke. And if you're not familiar with Mr. Richard Pryke, him and his team won an Oscar for mixing Slumdog Millionaire. So we were in great company. And again, I tried to be a sponge and just learn as much as I could. So on August 5th, armed with Richard's mixes, we left for the UK, and our return date was set for Saturday, August 28th. And on arrival, we had to quarantine for 5 days because we were still in the midst of the pandemic. So 5 days at the hotel, and we had to go through multiple tests the whole time we were there. And we were released from quarantine on day 5, but sadly at the end of our day. So we were now 1 day behind on our mix journey. So we made a schedule to get caught up, and we did get caught up doing roughly 12 to 14-hour days. The game literally found its audio identity in London. There's a huge piece of London that rides with this game as far as I'm concerned. The audio landscape came to life. All the elements came together. I mean, I was sitting there in the mix room listening to it, and I was hearing it for the first time as I had always imagined it. And it was such a great feeling. So one thing was, we had one map late in the game that musically it wasn't flowing well. It was just, the dynamics weren't there. It was there was just too much music playing all the time. So JS, my technical director, and I, we made a plan late at night. And then on the Sunday, I had Rich come over to my hotel, and we made the plan. He sent over the music within 2 days. We sent it to Montreal. Basically, about 6 days after we addressed we had a problem, we had the new music integrated into the map, and it was now stellar. So it just shows you, like the pace we were keeping. So we returned back from London to Montreal exhausted, but feeling victorious. We felt we had really delivered the goods. So finale back home. When we got back home, we recorded a video actually for Zero to Hero that you could see on YouTube or wherever. The songs from the album became a strong marketing asset used in most of the trailers, which was advantageous to the marketing team. And currently, as a side note, the songs have over 1 million listens on Spotify, which as a musician still blows my mind. And, it's something I can't really grasp. The last mile. So when we got back from the UK, there was 5 weeks left. When we returned, we spent it on playing the game all the time, final checks on all areas, audio bug fixes, as well as adding some small and final polishes. I worked with marketing and Johan Boudreau to mix and sound design all the trailers for the game during these last months. And in the end, we delivered 5 hours of score, plus 2 hours of licensed music, plus a 10-song original rock album, totaling over 8 hours of music. So to me, we definitely succeeded in providing a huge bang for our buck for our player. Not to mention all the probably about 8 alien languages created as well. So my closing thoughts, this is a quote from an interview I did in the UK that I barely remembered because I was just tired and it was early in the morning. And when I read it, I was like, wow, that's really cool. I can't believe I said that, but there couldn't be truer words spoken. When you surround yourself with the right people, the confidence kind of outweighs the pressure. And that was taken from an NME article. And that's right. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there was huge pressure to deliver this game, but every step of the way, I was surrounding myself where I had weaknesses with strengths, whether it was Richard Jakes, whether it was Randy Eckhart, whether it was Johan Boudreau for the Star-Lord album and mixes, whether it was Sébastien Croteau for the Monster people. Surround yourself with experts. It's the best and most foolproof way, I think, to get yourself to the finish line and accomplish your vision. take time to experiment and look for ways to push audio more into design. We have to be proactive. We have to look for ways, like I did, for those X factors. And most importantly, be proactive, propose ideas. Don't sit back. Nobody's going to walk up to anybody's desk and say, hey, we're waiting for you to come forward with a great idea. You have to find these ideas and then try and sell them to people. And that's how you kind of get audio more out of the background and into the forefront. And finally, surround yourself with experts. I can't stress it enough. It's probably what helped me achieve this vision the most. So that's it. I want to thank you all for your time and your patience. On LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me, it's Steve Szczepkowski. On Twitter at Sheprock99. I'd be happy to meet and talk with any of you. In fact, I'll see if I can set up a small Zoom group for after this. If people want to come in a room and hang out and ask some questions or talk, I'm happy to do it. So I'm happy to take any Q&A right now if anybody has any questions. Thank you very much.
Hey, Steve. Awesome
Hey.
to hear about the audio journey and hear it from start to finish. I had a question about the recording stems, the orchestra recording. Did you split the orchestra recording up by strings, brass, percussion, or what was your methodology for the stem recording and the reason, meaning for implementation purposes or rather mixing purposes?
So Richard delivered all the mixes. I mean, he would have been a better person to give you the final how everything was put together, but we did ask for 7.1 stems. So it was basically like the strings, the brass, the perks and everything. I can't remember all of it right now, but we went with 7.1 for all the cutscenes, and in game was always quad ambiances.
Okay, awesome. And it sounded like, I know you mentioned you did for the June E3 demo, a hybrid orchestration where you were blending virtual and live elements. For the final, did you end up using any of the virtual strings or brass to augment the live recordings, or not so for that?
Negative. All live, all real. Nothing. There was nothing MIDI that went into the final game.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, how you doing? That was
good.
Interesting information there.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, in your experience dealing with kind of the legal and licensing aspect and all of that knowledge base I'm sure you acquired, I had a question just kind of pertaining to ownership when you're creating original compositions for a game project or really
so like the Star-Lord band stuff now, you mean?
Yeah, like anything that you actually created, not necessarily the licensed songs.
The licensed music, I mean, the ownership stays with the writers and all that, but the Star-Lord band was something that basically was part of the game delivery. So, Disney, I was able to keep writing credits and all that, but at the end of the day, it was part of the game that we delivered to Disney Marvel.
And that's pretty much a typical deal for something like that in the gaming industry in terms
generally, yes. Yeah, I would say so.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for the talk.
You're very welcome. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Dana. I had a question about the transitions you were talking about between the licensed music and the score, like the one you showed like in the chapter 1 and chapter 3. You said you guys had to do like a lot of time manipulation to the songs to like get it to work. Like what was that?
No, so actually what it was that example was just for the one that I showed you for the hot chocolate, and because it was a long scene with, like I said, there's at least 3 or 4 choice wheels in that scene. So how do you, like, when you want to get the ending on that, how do you get to that ending where the train trip to here is going to change every time? So we had to get really creative, and we did find, obviously, using loops in specific places, and then bringing in the layer of just the and then cut to stereo. We brought that in over the loop on a beat. So there's a lot of cheating going on, but it actually sounds pretty seamless when you hear it.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of my question. Like, if you guys were using loops and like editing and stuff, did you guys, for like a lot of the licensed music, did you receive like any stems of them?
No.
To manipulate just the straight. Okay, gotcha.
No, straight tracks, and then obviously we had to respect all the legal stuff of manipulating songs. It gets tricky on what you can do. Like you can't start rearranging the song where it starts with a chorus and a verse. You know what I mean? So we had to still be careful. It wasn't like carte blanche, do whatever you want. but we respected the song, and it was just about making smart decisions. Like when it went into the music break, it's a long break, so you're able to kind of go, oh, well, there's a break here. We're not changing the structure of the song. We're actually just extending the break for, let's say, 64 bars instead of 16. You know what I mean? So just finding smart places where we could cheat. And then, like I said, the ending part, that punch that takes you to the stereo, was actually a separate stem that we created that we just brought in over beat at the right time. If you listen to it isolated, you can kind of hear where it jerks a bit. But in the context of the game, when you're listening to the dialogue, it's seamless. And like, I was so happy with the result.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi. What a great story you've been telling through all of this. For the orchestra recording with 5 hours and it being fresh as far as an ambition, what was one of the biggest surprises, or if not a surprise, your biggest takeaway from that process?
So this might surprise you, but as a guy, like I said, you know, like, of course I love film scores and John Williams and you know, all the Morricone and all the spaghetti westerns and all that. But what I learned was the power of a live orchestra. I mean, I've been to see, like, you know, Metallica concerts and Motorhead and, you know, Kiss and all these bombastic shows. Live orchestra is the true heavy metal, as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's nothing more powerful than hearing a full orchestra playing some thematic piece of music that just, I mean, for me, it's changed how I hear orchestrated music, you know?
Excellent. Awesome.
That would be my biggest takeaway, is just realizing how powerful a live orchestra is, because I'd been hearing the MIDI tracks forever and I've never worked with a live orchestra. And I remember being like, my bedroom's right above my recording studio. I can remember waking up one morning and I'm hearing the orchestra through my pillow and I'm like, God, I'm listening to this game way too much. And then I realized, oh no, wait, I have my Abbey Road stream still running from yesterday. And I ran downstairs like with my coffee. So every day I would listen to the orchestra recordings, because I couldn't fly down there. The COVID was really high at the time and I would have had to quarantine for 2 weeks and I couldn't give up the time. So just listen, like I would run down here with a coffee and just sit here and just listen for like 3 hours to just hear to hear the music go from MIDI to live. I couldn't believe it. It's like going from A to B, just how impactful it was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I learned that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I can't really see if there's any other speakers. So but once again, I will say that, you know, this was a huge team effort, and, you know, I get to sort of coordinate the chaos and build the team, but without these people, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you today for sure. So it goes back to my whole surround yourself with experts, build an amazing team of people around you can trust. And yeah, you'll probably deliver exactly what you were hoping to deliver.